Welcome back to Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. I am your host and the creator of this project, Hijoma Uruwo. Those of us who've been fighting for racial justice for many years saw suddenly in 2020 more attention and more money than we had ever imagined before. This was really helpful for us in accomplishing a lot of our goals, but it also showed a lot of cracks in the networks and the organizations we had built. All of the infighting, all of the unclear procedure, all of the kinks we hadn't quite worked out became magnified under this intense scrutiny and this flood of resources that we weren't prepared for. A lot of us working towards racial justice in those years suffered from a lot of the internal conflict that tore a lot of our movements apart. In the years since, many of us have been trying to figure out what we need to do in order to make this vital work last, and last in a way that doesn't crush those trying to do it. When I was talking with Richie Reseda from my book, Be a Revolution, one of the things that he talked about was how often we are externally focused in our abolition work. We are looking at the systems that are oppressing us, and we are demanding different or better from them. We're demanding their destruction. But often the people we're talking to, the people we're demanding from, are not people in our communities. And so while we're doing that, while we're making these very necessary appeals and demands to those outside of our communities, we're also often ignoring our own relationships in our communities and how we treat each other. When conflict arises in our movement work, we often turn to behavior that mimics a lot of the behavior we are trying to fight from those outside of our communities. How can we fight the cops when we act like cops toward each other the moment things get tough? Carceral systems don't just exist in our governments and in our schools. They also exist in our head. So what we're going to talk about today is how to kill that cop in your head so that we can live liberation right now, every day, and ensure that the work that we do really does get us free. Just as these oppressive systems cause harm to our communities, carceral behavior causes harm to our relationships and even to movements aimed at liberation. It's easy to understand how this happens. We have been raised in carceral systems. It's not just the systems that impact us, but when we think about our familial relationships, how we are treated in schools, our workplaces, our churches, these are often carceral spaces that rely on punishment in order to get what they want. Our books, film, television, they all glorify carceral behaviors. Think about all of these film franchises whose entire premise is revenge. Think about all of these TV shows where the entire premise is finding the bad guys and locking them away. This is all carceral behavior that normalizes a punishment culture that then infiltrates every relationship that we have in our lives. We have been taught that in conflict, one side is right and one side is wrong, and that there is always a winner and a loser, even in conflict with people that we love and need to continue working with. We are told that people do the right thing because they're afraid of consequences, not because they're in relationship with each other and find mutual goals, and it is beneficial to do things that maintain the collective. We are told that people take power from you when they harm you, and the only way to get that power back is to harm them in return. We have been told that power is something you can only wield over others. And if you can't wield it over others, it is not power at all. And we are told that fear is the same as respect. We have been told that some people are bad and other people are good, and the good people get to decide what happens to the bad people and whether or not certain people get to be in society with us. We are told that some people are just evil, that some people just want to cause harm for harm itself. We have been told that humanity itself is conditional, that certain people can be beyond humanity and beyond the concerns that we would have for our fellow human beings. This shows up in all of our relationships. I'm a mom, and there is so much pressure on me as a parent to use carceral behaviors with my children. I'm told that I'm a bad mother if I don't punish my kids. I'm told that if my kids aren't afraid of me, they will not do the right thing. I'm told that I always have power over them, and I get to decide whether they get to be with their peers or not, whether they get privileges or not. We aren't in relationship together. I have power over them, and they depend on me. And respect that they show me is based on how much they fear me. We have carceral relationships in our workplace. We have these hierarchies where certain people get to decide whether you are or are not meeting goals that they set. You can be punished for not acting in a way which those who have been deemed an authority over you decide. Further, when there is conflict in the workplace, often a resolution looks like someone being punished and someone being deemed the person who was wronged and the person who is correct. In our movements, this behavior shows up all of the time. I have seen so many beautiful, important movements come apart at the seams due to how conflict is managed. Think of how often someone is accused of being toxic or abusive, and instead of thinking of repair, we think of punishment. Think about how many times we demand justice, but what we're actually demanding is the removal of someone from a space, a punishment of someone that often has nothing to do with the harm they may or may not have caused. Think of how often we even treat our advocacy for our community as conditional. There are people who we won't advocate for because they have displeased us or caused us harm. There are people who don't deserve justice even while we fight for justice. There are people who don't deserve liberation even while we fight for liberation. There are people who can be cast out even while we claim that we all matter. In our movements, when conflict arises, I often see people demanding the expulsion of others in the name of safety, peace, or justice, without investigation, without discussion, without any attempt at healing. We are told that if we do not cast people aside and cast people out, that we are aiding in harm. Why is this dangerous? This is dangerous for a lot of reasons, but think of how often when we're talking about abolition, we're talking about getting rid of police, getting rid of prisons. The number one question asked is, well, what will we do next time somebody does something wrong? What will we do if someone attacks you? What would we do without cops? What would we do without prisons? And that question is really hard to ask if we aren't practicing what we will do without carceral behavior right now. Even though I can't snap my fingers right now and get rid of all cops and all prisons, I can decide right now to live an abolitionist example in how I deal with conflict in my life. I can try things. I can see what works and what doesn't. I can see how we can resolve conflict, how we can heal, and what we can do to stay safe without locking people away or casting them out. When we don't do that work, we make it very hard for people to imagine a future without cops. When we can't show by example how this might look one day, how do we expect people to trust us when we say that the world that we want to bring in will be better? And this behavior tears our movements apart. It makes them incredibly unsafe. If you recognize that there is something you could do through misunderstanding, through disagreement that would get you cast out of one of the few safe spaces in your life, why would you even join? When you're already targeted by the state, when you're already disenfranchised by society, why would you risk opening yourself up to further harm from your own community by simply disagreeing with someone? Further, once it is known that our movements are carceral in behavior, it is very easy for people to manipulate us and manipulate disagreement and conflict in order to pull us further apart. We've seen this on the internet. We've seen people try to amplify disagreements within our movements to make them bigger than they are in the hopes that it will cause an irreparable fracture in our movements. And this stops our relationships from being strong. It makes all of our relationships tenuous and fragile. And we need to know we can count on each other. We need to know that we can work through conflict so that we have one safe, strong space in the really hard work that we have ahead of us. The idea that we get justice by punishing each other sets up really harmful hierarchies that set up further hierarchies in our vision of the future. If I have the right to punish you, I am putting myself above you. I am making myself an authority over you. That doesn't disappear once we've destroyed these systems. Those hierarchies simply replace the hierarchies we have now. And all hierarchy that says that certain people get to decide for others whether or not they get to be in society, all hierarchies like that are incredibly harmful and will lead to systems of oppression that look very similar to the ones that we have today. So where are some areas that we can start if we want to practice abolition every day in our lives? I would say pick one area of your life and really examine it. Start thinking about behavior that you may have been engaging in or seen others engage in that is carceral in nature, especially around conflict. For me, as a mother, parenthood is actually where I have been focusing a lot of my work, and it has honestly stressed me and pushed me into new areas of abolition that I never imagined I would be in before. I've had to think very creatively to have abolitionist parenting with a teenager. But I have tried to recognize that as a parent, I am responsible for my kids' well-being. I am responsible for guidance, but we are also in relationship with each other. And that means I have been learning to listen more, to engage in conversation, and to set goals together, my son and me, so that we can figure out what we want out of our relationship together. It's not as easy as saying, because I said so. It's not as easy as saying, do this or you're going to be in trouble. But we are closer than we have ever been before. My child isn't afraid of me. My child knows they can talk to me. And I know that I am thoroughly enjoying the relationship that we are building, and that we are building one that is going to prepare him to have healthy relationships in the future. In the workplace, I am an employer. And so I'm regularly thinking about, as an employer, what my role is, what my relationship with my employees is. And we are talking about that and negotiating that all of the time. I'm trying to think about ways that we can accomplish the goals that we have set and the goals that I have that isn't set up in fear of punishment or any sort of retribution. When we think about all of our relationships, it is so important that we start asking, where are we using intimidation or fear in this relationship to get what we want? And I know that those words can sound harsh, but it is so normalized we often don't see it. When we get in arguments with our partner and we feel hurt by our partner, often our first instinct is to lash out and hurt them back. Because if they know how it feels, then maybe they won't do it in the future. But that's a punishment behavior. And instead, we have to find new ways to communicate with each other so that we can talk about how we feel and talk about what we want in our relationship and in conflict. All of this work is available to us right now. And that's the beauty of it. We have the chance every day to live abolition. And if we choose to live it right now, we strengthen our chances of being able to build the system we want in the future. We don't wake up one day abolitionists. We don't wake up one day free. This takes work and it takes practice. We have entire lifetimes of conditioning around punishment culture that we have to work on breaking. We have to break it individually and we have to break it together. And we absolutely can do it. And the beauty of this work is we get to see results every day. We don't have to wait until all of these systems are crushed. We can see results now. And every result we get now strengthens our ability to get the big results we need in the future. Please be sure to check out the episode notes for this episode, where I have questions you can ask yourself and your peers to help you build the abolitionist future you want today. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Until All of Us Are Free, a year-long multimedia education project dedicated to Black liberation as collective liberation. Please be sure to go to untilwearefree.com to see those episode notes that I've worked really hard on. You can also find all of our past episodes there. It's also where you can sign up to be a paid subscriber to this project. This is a purely self and subscriber funded project. There is no outside funding. And so your support helps me make the best possible content that I can. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more episodes, especially for this month that is really focused on collective liberation 101. We're going to be talking about other fundamental aspects of collective liberation this month.